Today in this Mass is the first time that I'm going to be blessing roses during a Mass. I think it's a beautiful tradition. I mentioned several intentions that I'm holding in my heart today. I have others as well. But there's one which I didn't mention, I want to mention as I begin the homily. And today marks the 20th anniversary of my entrance as a religious. In other words, I've been a servant brother of the Home of the Mother 20 years today. So I'm holding, and I'm also thinking, this is the reason I celebrated this today. The reason I entered as a brother today was precisely because my own conversion was through the Rosary. So I personally have a huge devotion to the Rosary and to roses. In this homily, I wanted to just talk about, because we're blessing the roses, I wanted to center myself and just show how important it is to understand that the Rosary is well called a rosary, that it's good to use the symbolism of roses. Time out, 1 second. I'm going to grab a rose. I'll be right back. This is a rose. You've seen it many a time, and it's interesting because the Rosary, when it was first called, the term Rosary was actually something that was not a religious term. The term Rosary was actually something that was given between two people who were dating. It was actually in the Middle Ages, they would give each other a series of roses that were connected. That was the first way, and it was a secular term. Moreover, there was people who were complaining that it shouldn't be used as a religious term, that the Rosary should not be called a rosary because it's something which is used, so to speak, in dances. It's something which is used in the secular world. We should not call it a rosary. But guess what? Today it is called a rosary. I think one of the details which I think is fascinating, one of the oldest stories of when the rosary was called a rosary, and one of the things that pushed in that direction was one time they found a friar, a Franciscan, who was in his room, and he was supposed to come down for the meal, and another Franciscan went up and saw him kneeling before a statue of Our Lady and roses coming out of his mouth. That's pretty weird. If you go to somebody's room and you see roses coming out of your mouth, that's weird, but it shows the link between the Rosary and the way of praying the Rosary well and the roses themselves. How those acts, those prayers that we say in the Rosary can be an act of love. And they're supposed to be that. If they lose that aspect, it's no longer a rosary. But I think it's interesting because roses have three aspects. I think when I think of a rose, there's three things that come, when I think about a rose like this one, there's three things that come to my heart that have to do with the Rosary. One is the fact that roses have thorns. If it doesn't have thorns, it was probably cheaper, but it wasn't a rosary. Another aspect is that roses, they're not like lilies. They're not like other flowers. There's other more spectacular flowers that kind of are more exuberant, so to speak. They spread their leaves more. Roses don't. Roses are a flower which are recollected, so to speak. They're a flower which concentrate all their energy in producing fragrance. If it doesn't smell, it's probably a rose which wasn't freshly picked. But it comes from that. This is not like somebody can tell me that scientifically it's not that, but there's a beauty to that recollection of the rose. It's not exuberant, it has interiority, so to speak. It has an inside to it. And the other aspect that I find fascinating is that roses, they take a long time to bud. If anyone out here has ever had a rose bush or tried to cultivate a rose bush, in Spain we have rose bushes as well, and I think it took, I don't know if it was 10 years for them to start budding. That's a long time. This, just to begin with, and we'll work backwards, just to begin with, do not give up on praying your rosary. Don't think, I've never gotten anything out of it, it hasn't helped me. Don't give up on praying the rosary. Stick with it. Pray the rosary as a family. It hurts. Pray it with your loved ones. Pray the rosary, stick with it, it will bear fruit. Remember, we have the glove here of Padre Pio, And that glove is also a reminder of several stories. One, Padre Pio, with those gloves, wearing those gloves, would pray his rosaries. Padre Pio, there was a moment when they asked him, how many rosaries have you prayed today? He said, they asked him 20, because they would count by mysteries. Like, how many mysteries have you said today? Have you prayed your 5 mysteries? He said, more. 25. He would normally pray 25 a day, just in case. 25 mysteries a day, which is 5 rosaries. Have you prayed 25 mysteries? More. They finally found out that he had prayed 160 mysteries that day. It's a lot of rosaries. Do you think that was easy? No, it wasn't easy. Humanly speaking, it's almost impossible. It's very difficult to be that centered on God. But that's one of the things he did with that glove. But I wanted to share because the rosary often comes to us, like we start praying the rosary when things get difficult. Please don't wait until things get too difficult. Start praying the rosary before that happens. But I think it's beautiful. There's a story of Anne Maline, I think is her name. I'm probably pronouncing it horribly wrong. That's okay. The story is still true. But her husband, they were together preparing a picnic for the family, and she fell into a seizure. She was still very young. She would have been probably in her 30s. She fell into a seizure and didn't know what happened to her. Her eyes were white. It was very scary for the family, for the husband, for everybody. And she was in the hospital, and she was also pregnant. And they immediately came to him very soon afterwards and said, if you don't put her on a heart and lung, if you don't put her on certain machines just to keep her alive, the children are certainly going to die, and she's already a vegetable. She's not coming out of this. And this young man, he found himself walking by the front yard of his neighbors, and he was thinking of taking some roses and bringing them to a statue of Our Lady. He said, I'm not going to do it. Not the moment. He later on had the same healthy temptation again when he was passing through the street. He found another person who was selling roses. He bought roses. And he brought them before a statue of Our Lady. And as he was grabbing the roses and putting them before the statue, obviously he was holding them close to his heart, because as he was pulling them out, one of the thorns stuck into a novena of Padre Pio. Boop! And he found himself, he was a religious man, but he had never prayed like he prayed then. He found himself praying to Padre Pio, who prayed the rosary, and he found himself praying from the heart. He later found himself in the hospital with his wife, she was in a horrid state. She was bleeding from all over the body. Every pore was bleeding. It was very scary. And he ran into a man who also had the glove of Padre Pio. It could be the very glove we have here. I have no idea. But it could be. He ran to the man with the glove, and that glove, the man said to him, explain to your wife what we're about to do, just in case she has some consciousness, just in case she might even be hearing us with all those tubes attached to her. So the husband told his wife, we're here with the glove of Padre Pio. We're going to pray and we're going to bless you with the glove. They presented the glove, they put it on her. She grabbed the glove. Remember that she was in a comatose state, she was not able to move. She grabs the glove and she does the sign of the cross 3 times. And after making the sign of the cross, she puts the glove on her head and on her womb. Needless to say, she recovered completely, not in the instant, but over a period of several weeks, she recovered, and all 3 of them, her and her 2 twins who were born, came out on September 23rd, the feast day of Padre Pio. They were all born, they came out of the hospital all together, all healthy. Praise God. I'm saying this because that last aspect, the idea of the thorns, it's important to know that the best rosary is precisely the one that's the most difficult. Don't think, oh, this rosary is really hard for me, I'm not going to pray it. We have to remember that precisely when it's difficult is precisely the moment when we have to try to fight to be recollected. It's not easy. The most important part of the rosary isn't the words. I'm not saying don't pray the rosary. The words are important, but the most important is the heart, the recollection of the heart, the thinking about those mysteries of our faith, to have that life of Our Lady become part of our life. That's so important. Don't think I'm just going to rattle it off. But remember, the most difficult is the most important rosary to pray. The rosary that one day when you say, look, today There's a young man who was a military officer. He had spent, it was over 24 hours awake. He had been very busy the entire day. And he found himself coming back to his room, and on the room there was his rosary that was over his bed. He would always pray the rosary every day. But that day, he did not want to pray the rosary. He was exhausted. And he knelt down and he said, Mary, if you want me to pray it, I'll pray it, but I think you don't want me to pray it because I'm so exhausted. He might have been up for 32 hours. If you don't want me to pray it, Lord, just give me a sign, but I think I should go to bed now. So, obviously, he started getting into his bed when the rosary fell from the wall. The rosary was on nails in the wall. It shouldn't have moved. There was no reason. There was no moving of the wall. There was no earthquake. The rosary fell. And he said with that sign, he prayed the most fervent rosary he had prayed in his entire life. Don't give up the rosary. Don't think it's a waste of time. Pray your rosary. Pray it from the heart. It's a prayer of love. May those roses come from your lips. And may you become that rose. May your life be an act of love for Our Lady. Amen.